I've had my hands on the Sony NEX 5 or NEX 5 now for a few hours, and I'm just going to share a few first impressions of the camera. This is obviously Sony's first entry into the category which is currently occupied by Olympus and Panasonic with their Micro Four Thirds system, and Samsung as a recent entrant with their hybrid system in the NX10. Now the most immediately obvious thing about the Sony NEX 5 is just how small and light it is. It is the world's smallest and lightest interchangeable lens camera, and you could certainly becomes apparent when you hold it. You get a sense of this, how small it is. Now in order to make it as small as possible, they haven't included a viewfinder. There is an optical viewfinder that you can buy as an accessory, not an electronic one yet, although that may come in the future. And even the flash has been taken off the body and has been turned into a little accessory which clips on the top. Now I don't have to worry about paying extra for this, because Sony, at least to their credit, do include the flash in the box, and there's a handy little case which attaches to the strap, so you can keep the flash in the case on the strap, but you don't need it, and you can just pop it on when you do. Hopefully you won't need to use the flash too much, as much as you would with some cameras, because one of the things Sony's boasting about with this camera is the good high ISO performance. We'll come to that in a bit. Back to the body. As I say, it's very small and light. The NEX 5 has a much deeper grip than the NEX 3, and I must say I much prefer the NEX 5 grip. I find the NEX 3 does not so much purchase, so you don't have as much confidence when you're holding it. You can get a good firm grip on it. On the back of the camera, there's a really lovely 3-inch high-resolution 920 dot LCD screen featuring Sony's True Black technology, and it's also very, very thin, as you can see there. And as I'm also demonstrating, it tilts and swivels, so you can shoot from high and low angles, although of course there's no sideways, so you can't, for example, swing it out to the front and do self-portraits and that sort of thing. The quality of the screen is very, very good. It's very bright, very easy to see. As you can also see on the camera body, they've kept it uncluttered. On the top there is simply just a power button, an on-off button, the shutter button and a playback button, and there's a dedicated movie mode button which is separate to the exposure button, to the still picture button. On the back there is just these 3 controls. Now the main central one, not only is there north, south, east and west press points here as you'd expect, but also it rotates as well. And there are these 2 buttons here where the function of these buttons depends what mode you're in, and there's a display on the screen next to these buttons that tells you what those buttons are doing in any one particular mode. Often there's one that will take you to the menu, or to change the shooting mode, or it'll take you back to the previous screen, for example. Down here, this button often displays shooting tips. One of the things Sony's been very, very keen to do on this camera was to make it an easy transition for people upgrading from a compact, who it sees as its natural market for this camera. And to do that, they've included the entire instruction manual on the camera, which you can scroll through at any time. They've also included a whole range of shooting tips, which you can refer to at any time. If you forget what a particular mode does, then the camera will explain. If you know what you're doing, you're a DSLR user and you're familiar with the aperture and shutter speeds and so forth, you can use the creative modes, the program, aperture, shutter, and manual, where you'll get full display of aperture, shutter speed. You've got live RGB histogram displays and all the things that a serious experienced photographer would expect. But if you're not that experienced, then you really find all this very confusing, or you'd just rather just not worry about it all, you can go into either the intelligent auto mode, which automatically selects the scene modes, or one of the manual scene modes, of which there are quite a few, to choose a particular type of subject, like sports or portrait or night portrait, for example. If you're in one of the intelligent auto or one of the scene modes, you get a much more slimmed down interface, and for example, instead of getting a display of aperture, you get something called background defocus, which is a great idea because it makes it pretty clear what it does, and this rotating dial enables you to see, and there's a little sliding dial on the screen that tells you whether you want more or less background in focus, and you can just turn the dial to defocus the background if you like. Now Sony have added a lot of features to this camera to make it very, very appealing. It's got, of course, some of the features from the Cybershot range, such as the sweep panorama, but it's enhanced. The sweep panorama here is enhanced over the versions in their compact range, in that it takes still pictures rather than video to create the stitched panorama, so that it's much higher quality, much higher resolution. You can hear it going click, 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 with the motor drive going as you do it. It's also 3D ready, in that it can, there's a mode in which you can captures the left and right section and creates a 3D sweep panorama. I think there's a firmware upgrade supposed to be coming later in the year to actually effectively switch this on, but it's in the camera already, and you'll of course need to view those 3D images either through the camera or through a PS3 on a compatible 3D Sony Bravia television. But obviously the technology is there, so if you're into 3D, this is obviously something that may appeal on that front. It also has other features, of course, like the 7 frames a second, which are again in some of the over short bursts, which are in some of the cyber shots. The twilight anti-blur mode, where you can take a series of pictures in low light, they stitch them all together to give you a sharp image. All of these things which are things which you won't find on competitor cameras, which obviously Sony hope will sway you towards this camera. Now Sony have announced 3 lenses, 2 of which I had the opportunity to use. The 16mm Pancake, which is the most compact option, which is a 2.8 lens, which is ideal. It's a wide angle, ideal for low light shooting as well, with a fast 2.8 aperture. It also has the standard 18 to 55 kit lens, which is image stabilized in the lens. Now there's no image again, to make the camera as small as possible, there's no stabilization in the body. Sony have put it in their lenses but not in the Pancake lens, again for size reasons. They've put optical image stabilization in their 18 to 55 and in the third lens, which isn't actually out yet, which is the 18 to 200. Now all of the lenses are silver finish and they all have a really nice nicely engineered quality about them. They feel very smooth. They've got a decent grip. Even the manual focusing grip, you can enforce or use autofocus, but there's also a manual focus assist, so you can switch to manual focus at any time if you select that mode in the menu options. First impressions of images, again, this is not a full production camera, it's a pre-production camera, but images we've taken so far seem extremely good. It promises very high things. Sony do claim that this has the lowest noise of any of the cameras in this sort of mirrorless camera category, and initial viewings would seem to bear that out. I haven't had the opportunity to compare it directly with competitors though, so I'll reserve judgment on that. But certainly, first impressions are images seem very, very good. If I'm levelling any criticisms at the camera so far, there are a couple of small niggly things. It's a disappointment, for example, that although there is an accessory microphone that you can attach, Sony's own accessory microphone for better audio when shooting video, there is no input socket for an unknown NEX 3.5mm jack for a third-party microphone. So you are kind of stuck with Sony's own microphone. I think that's an omission which is a little bit disappointing. There's no electronic viewfinder, so the only viewfinder you've got is an optical viewfinder, which is matched to the 16mm here, so which is not terribly useful if you're using any of the zooms. Hopefully that'll come as something that can be fixed. What isn't quite so easy to fix is that I do find it, from an enthusiast point of view, a little bit on the fiddly side, accessing the sort of things like ISO, white balance, etc. In this camera. You do have to press a lot of buttons. When I did the ISO, did a range of ISO shots of different ISOs, I had to press about 4 or 5 buttons and turn the dial between each shot to change the ISO from 200 to 400 and 400 to 800, for example. And it would be nice to find an easy shortcut just to quickly change the aperture. It's not on the back dial here. You've got a flash, exposure compensation, drive modes and display modes on here. But I think some sort of other function button which you can assign to ISO or white balance or whatever it may be, or maybe you can find some other means of shortcutting that menu would be extremely useful. In general though, for the kind of point and shoot type person, it's hard to find any criticisms at all so far, and I look forward to getting a full review sample and providing a more in-depth analytical review of the image quality in due course.